to you. We're back. It's the Striker Texas MLS Podcast. I'm John Arnold in beautiful Dallas, Texas. Chris Bills joins us from Austin, back from Seattle. Victor Ariza down in Houston. This show is the show that recaps all three Texas MLS teams and previews their next action. Looking back to a weekend that included a good result from a Texas team, a bad result from a Texas team, and an okay result from a Texas team. FC Dallas beat LAFC 2-1. The Houston Dynamo and Sporting Kansas City battled to a scoreless draw. I'm not going to call it pillow fight, but bottom of the West. We'll get to that one. Don't worry. We will talk about that game, but it might not be our highlight. The Seattle Sounders 3-0 over Austin FC. Action during the week as well for Austin, Chris. We'll get into that game against Real Salt Lake on Wednesday later, but let's start with FC Dallas and with LAFC, a team that we added to the Strikers content roster. We now have coverage of LAFC on the Striker. I don't know if they're trying to do us a favor, like as a thanks, but they do not like coming to Texas, guys.
I say, does LAFC have a problem?
Oh my gosh, does LAFC have a Texas problem? They lose 4-1 in Austin and lose to the Houston Dynamo. They go up against the FC Dallas. A goal from Chicho Arango just before the halftime break, even though Ryan Hollingshead, who I wrote about during the week on the Striker, coming back to Frisco, coming back to Toyota Stadium, where he'd spent his entire MLS career before the season, traded to LAFC in a swap deal for Marco Farfan. He gets a red card. I would say controversial, but to me, it's the right decision. I really think that he was the last man on this play. Paul Arriola gets in behind, and he takes him down. I mean, he fouls him. He's the last man. It's a denial of obvious goal-scoring opportunity, and he's off. So FC Dallas has this opportunity to take advantage, but don't. And then LAFC get the lead. Now, I believe they were 15-0-0 win scoring first this year in MLS play. Undefeated, untied. But despite that, FC Dallas is able to get it turned around, and it's basically all because of Jesus Ferreira. Fantastic performance from him. He ties the all-time mark for goals in an FC Dallas season. He's got 18 now on the year. But when I talked to him after the game, Chris, he said, hey, it's not about the individual achievements, although he does want to be the top scorer in a season for FCD. He wants to get at least one more goal, maybe two, in the last 3 games of the season that FC Dallas have. But he said more about the individual achievements. This is about sending a message that FC Dallas is an MLS Cup contender. This is something that you mentioned last week, Chris, that you feel like this team is not just looking at the playoffs, looking at hosting a playoff game and one win, that they really could be in the mix for silverware. They've now beat the best team in the East at home against Philadelphia a couple weeks ago. They beat the best team in the West at home against LAFC this weekend. Chris, it's a statement win for FC Dallas, at least according to Jesus Ferreira. Did they do anything to solidify their case for you?
He's absolutely right, and I think that it's a good to get a win like this for people to sit up and take notice. And the fact is that the FC Dallas is only 3 points back from Austin FC now for second place.
Oh, I was going to bring that up, man. It's getting close. There's a game in hand for Austin, but it's getting close.
There's a game in hand. I always say about games in hand in MLS. Give me the points every day in this league over the games. But FC Dallas, I've thought that they're an MLS Cup contender now for a little while. I think this win does solidify that. But also, Jesus, be careful what you wish for. What Austin FC said, a couple weeks ago when they beat LAFC, and it hasn't gone so well for them. So don't get too full of yourself right now just because you get this win in the regular season at home in front of your fans. But keep pushing, and you might end up being able to ride home momentum all the way through the playoffs, the way that this thing's looking, third seed, and certainly if they get up to 2, LAFC gets knocked off, they're going to be, playing playoff games at Toyota Stadium, which is, that's a big deal for the fans up there.
All right. You're saying Jesus Ferreira, don't get ahead of yourself. And then you're like, well, we'll probably see MLS up in Toyota Stadium, so that'll be interesting.
Hey,
we'll see.
I get ahead of myself all day. Maybe I have a problem here. Austin fans want to blame me.
Well, we'll get to that. We'll get to that in a moment, Chris. We'll get to that in a moment. But sticking with FCD, I thought it was a game in which, after that red card, you say they got to take advantage. And there was nothing. I mean, there was really no kind of push for FCD. There wasn't any sort of energy. And then that goal before the half sort of what's the opposite of a cherry on top? I don't know what the opposite of the cherry on top is, but it's like I don't want to get into scatological metaphors, but like it was not good, right? And they go into the locker room down 1-0, knowing that LAFC haven't lost a game in that game state before all season, and knowing they really should have had more opportunities, more scoring chances, a lead, and just didn't really produce anything. Even in the second half, it wasn't the best showing. FC Dallas really missed, I think, Alan Velasco, who was injured the day before the game, thigh injury that's going to keep him out for, I think, the rest of the regular season, because I don't think they're going to want to risk him, and they don't need to, I don't think. And Paul Arriola, who apparently was dealing with a back issue, apparently was using a wheelchair for a little bit during the week. I should have gotten up to Frisco on Friday. I went up earlier in the week, and like all of a sudden, all these guys are injured. I'm like, what the heck's going on? But he had a brilliant play on the first goal. There was a foul outside the box. Arriola takes that kick quickly, sets up Jesus Ferreira for the goal, and that's 1-1. And just after that, Ferreira with the free kick might have taken a bit of a deflection off Gareth Bale, might have, but it beats Maxime Crepeau, and FC Dallas has the 2-1 win. I think a couple other players to highlight besides Ferreira and Arriola. Like I said, they missed a full-strength Arriola. They missed a full-strength Velasco. But in their absence, you saw what Leggett and Pamecol are providing this season. I think, and even more, they maybe needed a little bit more from FCD. And Nkosi Tafari, center back. Matt Hedges missing his second game in a row with a knee knock. He should be back pretty soon. But when you're talking about Carlos Vela starting and Gareth Bale coming in, when you're talking about Chicho Arango, when you're talking about, all the different stars that LAFC have, DPs and Mwanga, like the fact that Tafari steps in, Victor, and is able to keep them to one goal, sort of a lucky goal, lucky bounce situation, it's on the defense, don't get me wrong, but like not an individual error, not a moment of brilliance from Vela or anything like that. The fact that FC Dallas is able to keep an attack like LAFC's in check a week after they keep Minnesota United and Emmanuel Reynoso in check, maybe that Nashville blowout that FC Dallas suffered was the wake-up call that they needed, because it looks like this defense is doing exactly what they want to do.
Well, good, because they needed it, right? I mean, I think that was the weak spot we've seen in FC Dallas. That Matt Hedges was probably the one unquestionable guy there because of his history, but even then, right? I think as a unit, we're wondering, is this something that can help FC Dallas be that MLS Cup contender, or is it, can they hold just enough to give enough patience to have the attack be able to get off and running and essentially connect all three pieces of the game for them? Because I think when we see there are elements to this FC Dallas team, right, that can make them very dangerous. Like you said, if Pamecol can get to his best form, right, Ferreira obviously can start getting some goals under him. I mean, he's only 4 goals from the Golden Boot race now. I mean, if these players,
I kind of thought that was off the table. Yeah, I kind of thought that was off the table, but 2 goals in this one. He's got 3 left against non-playoff teams. 2 of those games are on the road. When you look at the scenario for FC Dallas for individual awards, but when we're talking about could FC Dallas catch, I called them in my article a flagging Austin FC. I don't know if you think that's fair, Chris, but it is possible that FCD ends up in a much better spot than I think they thought they were going to, because it looked for a while like this team could get a home playoff game, maybe. Now, if they don't get a home playoff game, it's a massive disappointment. Victor, we were talking a little bit before the show started about the math. The math still says you need to get 6 points to clinch the playoffs. It's not going to be that number because other teams are going to lose. Everyone's a direct rival now, basically. But I think if FC Dallas does get that 6-point number, they'll play a game at home at least. And if they all of a sudden say, ooh, 2's on the table, let's go all out against, San Jose. Maybe we get Alan Velasco back for the Sporting Kansas City decision game if he's feeling good. You're looking at a team that if Austin keeps struggling, if this midweek game doesn't go to plan, all of a sudden they're in the picture for the 2nd seed, which carries massive benefits with it.
Yeah, and other than the Philadelphia Union, maybe, is there anybody who wants the playoffs to start sooner than FC Dallas does? I mean, the form that they're in, I think that you can see the finish line if you're FC Dallas. You don't have all these issues that LAFC and Austin FC are starting to sort through. And if I'm Nico Velasco, I'm saying, hey, let's get this thing going. Let's start this party now, because things can go wrong in a hurry. But the way things look, I like I've said for a couple weeks now, I think FC Dallas is primed and ready for a deep playoff run. I've got a lot of belief in this group right now.
I think showing what they did against LAFC to have a bad first half against a really good team, go into the locker room down, and then be able to turn that around, I think it does speak to what the team has built over the long term. Nico Estevez, after one of the games this year, if they all went together at some point, was saying, hey, this is like a long-term project. It's just year one. If they think they can do much, much better than this in year 2, year 3, year 4, fans should be extremely excited about the Nico Estevez project. But no need to get ahead of yourself. You can be excited about the playoffs once again. And
Dallas has done this before. It's a process. Win when you can, right? Get that window, go after it, do it now.
Yeah, and I think that's what they're starting to do. Jesus Ferredo, I think it's just worth contextualizing this guy's season to be having the season that he's having. The most prolific, potentially scoring season in FC Dallas history. This is incredible because remember a year ago, or not even, we were talking about Ricardo Pepi leaving,
right.
and would this team recover, and how are they going to fill the number 9 position? And it's next man up. And
that's the other thing. Because Ferreira's, I think by all accounts, barring a disaster, is going to the World Cup. Yes. What if somebody purchases him after the World Cup?
No, that's the thing. That's what I was about to say, is that I think that question of where did the goals come from is going to dog FC Dallas again next season, because it's going to be really tough to keep Jesus Ferreira around. I talked to him after the game about what it would mean to be, if he can get that 19th goal, and even if he doesn't, he's tied atop the all-time score sheet with Jason Kreis and Kenny Cooper, 2 absolute legends of the club. Of course, his dad is another one of the absolute legends. And he said, I want to write my name on the history book. I want to have my own place in FC Dallas history. He does. He absolutely does after this season. It's been unbelievably good. When you talk about kind of the eras changing, modern MLS, the fact that he is scoring as many goals as he is remarkable. The fact that last year he was in a playmaking role and, Nico Estevez and his staff come in and they say, that's our 9. That guy's our forward. He's going to score goals. And he did. I asked Nico Estevez after the game, he kind of laughed and said, I wish I could say how good I knew it was going to go. At the same time, he sort of did, right? He did make the change. He did have 100% faith in Ferreira to play this number 9 role. And it's been a fantastic season, Chris. You're right to kind of call him out and say, hey, let's give him a little bit of shine on the pod before we move on to Austin, because, look, Driussi's been unbelievable, but there might be there's 2 top 5, I think, MLS players this year in Texas, in Driussi.
For sure.
And in Jesus Ferreira. So,
all right. Absolutely, we can't drag this thing along any longer. We better
absolutely get excited. I'm excited to see what Ferreira does in these last 3 games and see if he can hold the record on his own. Either way, it's been unbelievable. Chris, it's all your fault. Austin FC loses again, 3-0. During the week, some weird vibes, some weird narratives. Media getting your lack of positivity as the Austin FC press corps getting some attention. Yeah. But it's hard to be positive after a game like this. Raul Ruidiaz with goals in the 12th minute and 34th minute. Gabrielson puts it in the Austin FC net in the second half. 3-0. The Sounders do exactly what they want to do. And Austin isn't able to have that counterpunch. 3 losses, Chris. What's going on?
3 in a row. And, I think you're alluding to Felipe Martin's midweek, sort of pointing to myself and some others in the Austin press corps for pointing out the fact that they had lost 2 games in a row. This is professional sports, guys. What are we talking about? I don't want to make that more of a story than it is. You can go read Phil West's column, sort of an open letter to Felipe Martins, saying, "Hey, if you want us to write positive things, play better." And that's kind of the point, right? Is that this team has had such a good year. We've covered all the good moments. Just a couple weeks ago, we were I was on this podcast talking about Austin FC as a legitimate MLS Cup contender, one of the front runners, one of the best teams in the league, and then they kind of, I think that they took maybe that those good vibes to heart a little too much. And I think, honestly, I think that's the message that's the string that Felipe is trying to pull on. And he's been pulling on it all year as one of the leaders of this group is, hey, people are doubting us. People, and it's not the right string to pull on because it's not working anymore. It's not working anymore, and it's not true. First of all,
yeah. Well, I think when we look at the problems on the field, Chris, you did sort of a crude no offense, but like kind of a crude, like, hey, whose fault were these goals? Like you just kind of like, like obviously, and you yourself were like, hey, it's more complicated than this.
It was
but, like,
Chris for not writing more positive stories.
all the goals that Austin FC has conceded this year have been on Chris and the other guys in the Austin press corps. No, but you kind of did a crude breakdown of like, okay, was this goal Cascante's fault? Was this goal Gabrielson's fault? Was this Stuver's fault? Was this kind of team goal? Man, these goals against Seattle, like, yeah, you can point the finger at one or two guys, but like ultimately the first two, they're both Rui Diaz goals are just team breakdowns. Like it's not, it's systematic, right? It's not an individual error.
And that's the thing. That's what's interesting about this performance in Seattle is that I had just gone through all of the goals from the last 20 games. And my takeaway was that like there's not a systemic failure happening here. There's individual errors, and a lot of times these guys are in good spots, are not making the plays, and I didn't come away that concerned. The Seattle defending, that was concerning. So yeah, it's like right after we're done analyzing and saying, okay, you guys are fine, just play a little better. They and the way that I put
the individual errors, clean up the
right.
One player needs to clean this up, or another player needs to cover those deficiencies. That seemed to be the problem going into this game.
And there's two things going on with this game in particular. One that's important that I think you mentioned is Sebastian Drusi, was out, with a moderate injury. We think that he'll be fine for Wednesday and Saturday. Precautionary. Certainly on the turf. This is the second time we've seen him not start in a match on NFL turf. The same thing happened in Atlanta. Those are the only two games all year he hasn't started. So that's definitely a theme. And I don't think anything to be super concerned about. He did have an MRI done. Nothing structurally wrong, but some pain, some swelling, and they didn't want to mess with it in Seattle. That makes sense. What doesn't make sense to me is the fact that you show up against a desperate Seattle team, and it's like Austin FC showed up thinking that they were playing, the ninth place team in the Western Conference, and the Seattle Sounders showed up. And it's like this is Raul Rui Diaz, this is Nico Ladero, this is Jordan Morris, and sort of treated these guys like they were just some punks from Kansas City or something, and it doesn't work that way. Seattle's at home when they're desperately fighting to get in the playoffs, and just open the door to them potentially being the team that comes to Austin in a couple weeks for the playoffs. Yeah. Because I mean, who's picking against Seattle at this point? Just the way that they're playing right now.
They could absolutely sneak into the playoffs, and of course, we've seen the Sounders B, the Sounders C come into Austin and have success. I know it's last year; it's a different thing, but yeah, I just don't think this was the result they wanted. Of course, conditioned by by those factors, but ultimately, you do start to look and say this game Wednesday against Real Salt Lake is important in the Western Conference playoff picture in general because Salt Lake sits on the precipice they're currently in, but they could easily fall out. We're talking about seeding. FC Dallas could have an opportunity to jump Austin if they drop points in this game. But also, Chris, I think way more important than those external factors is internally for Austin. It's fun to joke about like the media stuff. It is weird that they've brought that up themselves, but I think ultimately like that's not affecting the vibe of the team in the locker room. I don't think the vibe of the locker room could be very, very bad if they lose on Wednesday and it's 4 straight heading into the playoffs. I mean, this is the time where you need to be hitting your stride like the Sounders are, like FC Dallas is, like the Philadelphia Union are. And Austin isn't doing it.
Yeah, after all those defensive comments over the last few weeks, even before that, in some of the games that they were giving up goals at home, where they were trying to say, hey, don't point out my flaws. Look, you guys are fine. I thought there was a lot of accountability after this loss in Seattle. Even Josh Wolf saying we were lackadaisical, we weren't good enough. We got to get it fixed. For whatever reason, we don't have the edge we've had. And a lot of the guys that I talked to, there was a lot of, the same sentiment, which is we need to look ourselves in the mirror. And, these guys know that it's not been good enough. They know that they need to come back against Real Salt Lake. And I think they finally feel, pressure of FC Dallas on their tail and a little bit more urgency, which is, I think, I think that's been the main issue is that they piled up all these points early in the year. They're in second place. They're top of the world. They beat LAFC, and they just lost a little bit of that edge that they've had against these teams. And now they're playing against teams that are desperate and that are already in playoff mode. And Austin FC hasn't flipped that switch on yet. And it's time to flip that switch. They got to find it.
I agree, and I think the other thing that could be concerning for Austin fans is that it's the same issues popping up now that we've been talking about all year. It's an overdependence on Sebastian Driussi. What happens if he's not fit? What happens if he, suffers a knock early in a game and has to come out? There seems to be an overdependence there, and those collective defensive breakdowns. We've been seeing those things over and over this year. I think that's where, for me, more so than the vibe, the narrative, the stuff that I like to give you, Chris, a little bit of ribbing on and joke about with the team. I think more so than any of that, that's what's concerning. Is all year we've said, is this team too dependent on Driussi? Does this team have the collective defensive talent and effort needed to stop some of the best MLS attackers? Right now, the answers to those questions look like it's not what Austin FC wants, but I think it could be a total shift if they're able to take care of business at home against Real Salt Lake Wednesday. What are you looking for in that game, Chris? It's a quick one, quick turnaround, but a big spot that maybe didn't need to be as important as it seems like it is now.
Yeah, well, the other thing with this is that they can't just act the same, 11 that they did in Seattle. It's a long road trip. It's a short turnaround. They play again on Saturday, so all this stuff about man the mirror and having to respond, it's going to have to be some different guys. And I think it's a good opportunity for a guy like Emiliano Rigoni, who, is maybe now in shape enough to potentially, Big Rig. We could see him start potentially. I think Washington Caruso, Josh Wolf keeps getting asked about him. The fans want to know about him. I think we'll see him at least off the bench. I think that, but it's a collective thing. It's got to be through the group. I think it's time for some guys to step up and respond. And I think, honestly, it would be nice if somebody from this bench group, somebody to come off the bench and prove that, when the chips are down, they can step up and make a big play for Austin FC. Because I think that's part of what this team needs. They've been relying on the same 4 or 5, through 11, but the same guys over the last 2-3 months, and it's they need a little bit more belief throughout the 30-man roster.
It's a tough close to the season. They've got RSL at home on Wednesday, a Nashville team that just made them eat their lunch, that bullied them in Nashville. This time it's in Austin on Saturday, a trip to Vancouver on October 1st and October 9th. That decision day looks okay. You can probably take that one at home against the Colorado Rapids, but you also don't want decision day to mean absolutely anything. You don't want to have the pressure on, so they're going to have to perform 3 home games in the last 4, but against 3 teams that I think are pretty stout.
Yeah, I was looking back, and I might do a piece on this. I was looking back at the last few MLS Cup champions because I was just thinking about that every team goes through these swoons, and there is kind of a trend of I think NYCFC last year went through a similar thing right before the playoffs, or in those September matches, kind of like this lull. So there might be something there as far as don't panic yet. If they don't figure it out these last 4 games of the regular season, then
then panic.
Then panic. But I think that there's still time. There's still plenty.
I think the quality of opposition certainly has to be taken into account. These aren't just any teams that we're facing. It's Portland, Nashville, Seattle. Like you said, RSL coming in, Nashville again.
Yeah, I think Chris's point is really good about the desperation and sort of this playoff mode where it's such a cliche, especially, Victor, as in Latin America, where it's every game's a final. Every game's a final. But when players have that mentality, when the coaching staff has that mentality, I do think it shows and manifests itself differently in the game planning, in the tactical execution of the 90 minutes, and in the players' individual mentality as well. Even if Austin FC is starting to say that now, I don't think it's on the field.
Exactly what we saw against LAFC. The lights came on. These guys, thought that was the biggest game of the year, and they played. So they just got to get that back. It's not like there's some team that's not done it all year. We know that the best of this team is good enough. It's just a matter of making sure that you get that from the collective, from all 11 players on the pitch on a given night, and they haven't done that in 3 games in a row. It's a little concerning.
If you do want to hit a panic button, I know a team in Frisco that has an enormous red button, but they only let one person press it before the game. Let's talk a little bit about
not a grocery store bag.
Hey, I know, man. I couldn't believe that was. I think I missed the podcast after that one. I couldn't believe HEB sponsorship was there. I guess it's a beloved mascot. What's his name? People were tweeting his name at me. His or hers, I'm not sure. Or it's, I don't know. But
at the
anyway,
grocery
they
bag.
wouldn't let the mascot hit the button. They had some executive do it. It's like when they hand the NBA championship trophy to the owner. You're like, no, man, no. Steph just won the thing. Give it to Steph. Give it to the bag of groceries. Let's talk about the Houston Dynamo. They draw with Sporting Kansas City, a scoreless draw. Victor, I was talking to you a little bit before we started recording about this one, and just my sort of candid admission that I gave this one a pass. Two teams that are not going to make the playoffs, although Sporting Kansas City is still mathematically there.
You didn't make a mistake.
But looking at the recap of the game, watching a couple of clips, like there was some drama in this. Matias Vera goes off. The Dynamo have a few opportunities to win. And this is also the first game without Paulo Nakamura. So what were the takeaways from this one?
Yeah, I think overall, down here, fans like to see a more energetic Dynamo, an energetic coach. Kenny Bundy's trying to be very positive, right, with his, maybe not making excuses, trying to empower the players a little bit. I think overall you did see Houston pushing forward. Actually, the two yellows by Vera, I think it's the second one's obviously a stupid yellow because he already knew he was on one, right, and kind of to put your team in that situation. But in the second half, the team actually generated more chances, had the better opportunities, despite what the double yellow may tell you, the ejection may tell you. Houston should have won this game. They could have walked away with the 3 points at home. And again, lack of quality on the team is just not there. Whether it's just maybe not sharpness. Obviously, they've only trained 3 days under Kenny Bundy, but there was certainly plenty of opportunities to put this game away. Maybe even to win this game 3-0. A missed header by Thoro Farson. There was some bad luck on both ends. Both teams had a ball hit the top, the frame, the top post, and Corey Baird missed a couple shots there. So overall, again, coaching wasn't the only problem here with Houston. There has to be a roster overhaul in the offseason, but I would say it's an expected result.
In some ways, it was like Nakamura never left, right? It didn't seem like there was anything, which fair enough. Like it's just kind of like it seems like Bundy's a safe pair of hands who's going to get the line to the end of the season, and then the real rebuild starts. But I mean, there wasn't anything wildly different from what we've seen from the Dynamo the last.
Right. Other than the injuries and a suspension, I mean, the lineup was essentially, I think, what Paulo Nakamura would have put out there, which I think, Bundy said it would be selfish of him to start thinking about auditioning for the job, right? He's just there to kind of be the caretaker for the rest of the season. But I do think there was an opportunity here, even if you say that publicly, if you really want the job, if you really want to put yourself into contention, to put your stamp on it, right? Make this lineup a little bit your own. Play some of the younger players that maybe have a little bit better ability and just need more MLS minutes. Maybe we'll start seeing that as the lineup rotates here because they have a short turnaround. They play on Tuesday, but yeah, I think that's the biggest thing. People, and especially now they're officially eliminated, people want to see some of the younger players on the field.
Yeah, you got the E by the name, which you never want to see. As you mentioned, the Dynamo are back in action Tuesday, hosting the New England Revolution. They go to LAFC on the weekend, and then after the international break, they head to Nashville and host the LA Galaxy. That's brutal. I mean, we know they're not going to make the playoffs, but it's still a tough stretch. Dynamo could kind of play spoiler because those three Western Conference teams are all right there in the playoff hunt, and New England is in there as well. Maybe you see some of the young players tomorrow, Victor. It's a quick turnaround. It's an Eastern Conference team, even though they are in the playoff hunt. Who are maybe one or two players that fans might be thrilled to see in a starting lineup that they don't get to see that much, that might make someone happy and give a player a chance to show what they can do?
Yeah, I think obviously Barthlow got the start at center back this last game again because of the injury problems. I don't know that would have been the exact change, but that's one. He's in the second season. Beto Avila, I think it's a player that earlier in the year we were talking about maybe could get some MLS minutes. I think he's one that obviously played a couple games under Bundy and Dynamo too. Maybe can get a shot. Nelson Quiñones, the other winger that he just brought in from Once Caldas. What does he have to offer? I think that's somebody who needs more MLS minutes as well. Maybe we'll finally see some Marcelo Palomino. Fans have been asking for him for a long time. He's hit some great free kicks in Dynamo 2. Hasn't necessarily dominated MLS Next Pro, but maybe here's his chance to start showing what he can do, especially over a guy that one is injured like Memo Rodriguez, but also that hasn't provided that. And I don't expect him to start, but maybe you bring him off the bench for Darwin Quintero, something like that.
Victor, there's one other score I wanted to ask you about before we wrap. 33-30. Does that mean anything to you?
33-30. Why?
I believe you're an alumnus of the University of Houston. Is that right? Yeah, Texas Tech 33, Houston 30 in American football. In college, they don't tie. Now, the pro team, you guys are fine with ties, honoring the Dynamo, honoring the Dash. That was really cool from the Texans to do that. But Texas Tech, we've been running the Striker for 2 years. In both years, Texas Tech Red Raiders beating Victor's Houston Cougars. They were ranked. We weren't. What can I say? Guns up.
We're coming to the Big 12. We're coming to the Big 12.
I mean, there's going to be a lot more of these matchups. I'm looking forward to it. But we'll also look forward to matchups in the MLS Western Conference. Best thing I ate, I was in town. I'm not going to shout out. I went to a spot in Frisco, guys. Like, I watched the Tech game pregame. Can't recommend.
Right.
Chris, you're in the Pacific Northwest, man. It's always nice.
It was. You guys, I'm gonna go Victor on you. Little breakfast I had yesterday.
All right.
Familiar with shashuka? I think that's how you say it. It's like the tomato dish. It's like a tomato, like stewed tomatoes with tomatoes. Egg, kind of like a runny egg over top. And just kind of dip some bread in it. It was it hit the spot. Sunday morning brunch in Capitol Hill, which is a cool neighborhood in Seattle. I spent some time in over the weekend. So
very cool neighborhood.
Cool spot.
I last time I was there, I watched is it called bike polo? They like have their bikes and they're knocking each other off and kind of trying to score goals. It's like instead of using the horses for polo,
I'm not familiar, but that sounds appropriate.
They play it in a big park over there in Capitol Hill. They play. I think it's just called bike polo. Victor, you were at home.
Yeah.
Scoreless draw.
Yeah.
Goals off the field.
I tried to get some barbacoa yesterday, and again, can't recommend. But what I can recommend is the other barbacoa place I usually get mine at, Chema Meat Market. Missed it this week. Will not make that mistake again.
Yeah, sometimes you branch out, and it's like, you want something different. You want something new. That's what I did in Frisco, man. I usually just go to the coffee shop, but I wanted to watch the Tech beat down. It was 2 overtime, not a beat down. I wanted to watch the Tech game, and so I'm like, I'm gonna go to like a sports bar, like a Mexican joint. And like the service was good, the food was okay. It was just like the vibe is off. The vibe is off. But I think Frisco will be vibing in the playoffs this year. It was a great atmosphere, actually, by the way, against LAFC. Tickets were going for like $75 on the secondary market. So look, don't look now. Toyota Stadium could be the place to be in October, November. So, of course, we'll be covering it on the Striker. For Victor Riza in Houston, for Chris Bills in Austin, check out the Striker because that's where we post all the things that we write about. Yeah. Coverage of your favorite teams. We've got the LAFC coverage. We got the Galaxy coverage. We got Atlanta United. The 3 Texas teams, women's soccer. It's all over there on the Striker. We hope you subscribe. It lets us keep doing what we do. Until then, we'll talk to you guys next week on Striker.